Hi, and welcome to Asian Agribiz Podcast. I'm Arif Fahrudin. In this two-segment series, our editorial director Connie Pereira is speaking with JY Chow about the four key dimensions in agri-food post-COVID-19. In the first segment, they address the first two key dimensions, digitalization and displacement. The second segment will address the next two dimensions, disruption and sustainable development. Mr. Chow is an agri-food advisor and financing expert who has over 18 years of experience across operations, strategy, and banking in Asia Pacific.
Welcome back, JY.
Hi, Connie. Glad to be here again.
In our earlier conversation, we addressed digitalization and displacement, four key dimensions in agri-food post-COVID-19 that you alluded to in your article that is similarly titled. Today, let's address the next two dimensions, JY, disruption and sustainable development. Now, disruption is a word that evokes both fear and challenge and actually rattles the foundation of an enterprise. At the same time, it presents opportunities for brave hearts. But to address this challenge and opportunities to effect change, funding is required. Can you tell us, JY, where is the money coming from?
Yeah, about funding, right, Connie? I frequently say that in agri-community world, capital is a key raw material. So in comparison for agri or food entrepreneur, funding is a key catalyzer to success. And to be more specific, it's really about smart money. To give you an overview of funding, depending on which stage you are in your company growth, your funding needs will be different, and so your type of investors. For instance, at a very early stage, you will have angel investors. This is for seed investment. Later on, you will have venture capital funds, which will take over to invest in your business. And then when your business continues to grow and mature, you will go back to more mainstream financing. It can be lending, it can be capital markets through equity or debt. And angel investors and venture capital, what we call the venture capital corporate, what we call corporate ventures, venture capital, they are entering the agri-food. And it's quite a new thing. And most of the deals enter to be rather at the seed or early stage. We are talking about 500,000 of US dollars or 1 million. So now with some success story where we see diversifications of the access to funding, notably what I was just mentioning, the corporate venture capital, or even crowdfunding, which is sort of syndicate deals where even individual like you or me can invest, right? And investment in Agtech or Foodtech today, it only accounts for 3 or 4% of the total funding investment worldwide. So definitely we have a lot of room to grow. And again, funding is just a catalyzer. It is, for me, the great entrepreneurs with a great idea and execution that is the origin of value creations. So I believe for those great startups, there's no shortage of fundings. The key, it's, as I say, as a catalyzer, is really having the chemistry between the entrepreneur and the investors. That's what I mean by smart money, actually.
You did mention that these funds are available mainly for startups. But what about entrepreneurs who are already looking to level up their enterprises? How can they access funds?
I would say it's not only for startup, right? As I mentioned, you have angel investors, venture capitals, and the corporate venture capitals. Again, it's really a matter of where you are in your journey and what you need. So let me translate that, right? It's really about having the right partners, and I hope for your long and successful journey. For many entrepreneurs, it can be tempting to just take money or any money, right? And again, not all money are equal. The key is smart money, meaning that the great investors they will be a mentor for you. They open the right door. They will help you to avoid making the mistake. Even as a mature entrepreneurs, you may do some, right? And they will also work with you on the next round of fundraisings, right? And again, it really matters of where you are in terms of your level of maturity to find the best matching. So it's important to choose wisely your partners. It's about alignment and commitment. And I was reading that, between entrepreneurs and investors, rather you are startups with a VC or more mature company with investors. Actually, the length of your relationship is in average longer than marriage in the US. My recommendation is to enroll investors into your vision and engage with them into a discussion on how funding can bring you faster to where you want to be.
That's great. JY, can you tell us what are some of the AgTech, Foodtech, and Welltech innovations that have emerged and are working well?
Well, yeah, there's some proven model, and the most visible and most successful is all the food delivery solutions. But for me, this is more what I would put in the FMCG space. But back more in the AgTech or Foodtech, you have precision farming technology with connected farms. I think irrigation solutions have been proven to be a good solutions for many cases. I think the big topic now is all about the alternative protein, plant-based. You see the giant emerging companies coming from US, and you recently saw more news coming into Asia. But for me, I would say in that space, the sleeping giant will be coming from Asia, and especially from China. And that space is really about alternative pork. Because, as you know, pork is the most important protein source, meat for Chinese consumers. And beyond the opportunities for consumers, it has a critical impact for China to reduce the reliance to import either meat or soybean. So there's a huge geopolitical game behind that. And I think the sleeping giant is really about alternative pork for Asia. Of course, you have cell-based protein. I will not enter the debate between plant-based and cell-based. I think there's a lot of discussion about it. My take, I think there's space for both, and the future will tell us who will be the winner. You have insect proteins, you have algae, have great potentials. But in the continuity of this, you have precision fermentations. So like the new protein that come from, for instance, methane consuming microbes, for instance. But if you ask me more in details what working well, I rather focus on the overall space of what I call biotechnology. I think bio solutions is the future. I foresee a lot of solutions coming from that space. We can talk about bioprotein, bionutritions, biopesticide, biofertilizers, bioplastics, bio-wellness, and bios. It's funny because when I look at the development of innovation in the last 2 decades, it was really about digital. And I studied biochemistry before moving into food engineering. And at that time, I found that career opportunity in biology or in bioscience was not so attractive. But now, for young ones, it still is a really promising field.
JY, I want to pick up on smart farming and alternative proteins. Both are gaining traction, as you can see in our coverage as well. And as you rightly said, China has muscle, and I think more than a sleeping giant is a waking giant, I think. Yeah. What do you mean when you say that disruption has incredible power and responsibility to generate a positive impact?
Yeah, there's many things about it, definitely. I think disruptions has such a huge potential that we still haven't seen the full potential of it. Also, it's funny because to be honest, I was inspired by the Spider-Man quote that with great power comes great responsibility. And here is the thing, right? I believe that food is not the problem to our health or our planet, but rather the solutions. I believe agri-food would be a real environmental and health solution instead of a challenge. So ironically, disruption is really eye-catching things, but we have a buzzword about it. But in this area, we have the least visibility, giving the unlimited potential. So this is really intriguing of that space, right? So I think we are at the beginning of a fascinating journey about disruptions in our space. Just to give an example, right now, what is going on with the development of immunology against COVID-19, I'm sure they have a tremendous potential to help to solve African swine fever or bird flu or any zoonotic issues. So I'm very optimistic of how the disruptions will continue to change our industry.
You did say that you have a message on disruption for conventional processes. What is it?
That message, actually, I thought about it when I was preparing our discussion, because I was looking back at what I was doing 3 years ago for a presentation about disruptive factors in the animal protein. It was for your conference in Thailand 3 years ago. And that time, we took that topic about alternative protein in a meat conference. And I feel it was about almost that we are about cursing, right? But when we took now the topic now, there's so many things happening from the last 3 years. It's amazing, right? So it's a space that we have to get into, and the earliest is great. And I was listening to your podcast of Professor Hugh, and he talked about real meat and alternative meats, and he was really spot on that. So back to your questions, right? My message is agriculture is about technology. Our industry is fundamentally about innovation and progress. So our industry is all about disruptions. And today I feel there is a gap between the disruptive world and what we call the conventional industry. And for neither of us, it's good to stay in that bubble, right? I think we need to bridge that gap, and I think what we are doing is helping toward this, right? And we are preparing again for what I call the day after tomorrow, right? And meat and livestock industry, for me, is not about choosing either animal protein or alternative protein. It's more about how to anticipate these two industries to coexist and develop together, right? So the game changer is too big to ignore. So I will say for conventional players that be part of the disruptions and find your opportunity in that fast-changing space rather than waiting and be disrupted. So if you stay aside, it's like you let overvoting your industry. So be part of a journey, really.
You're right, JY. Professor Hughes did say that alternative protein will take up about 30% market share in the future, and both alternative protein and real meat will coexist profitably. And that's interesting to note. Now, let's move on to our next segment where we are going to talk about sustainability. So the United Nations is pushing sustainable development goals across many dimensions. And we see the bigger enterprises in animal protein taking giant steps towards sustainability across this value chain. How can this filter down to smaller enterprises to realize collective consciousness and a positive impact?
For small players, I think it's not that they do not care, but the reality is they have other basic needs and priority, and that priority is to be profitable. So I think that for some of them, the first thing is to elevate the economics, either to reward with a premium or increase profitability by changing or improving the farming practice. Ideally, of course, you do both. We see that some of these players, the smallholders, farmers, actually the margin can be very thin, and the risk is not secure. There's no insurance in place and so on. So it's not easy to make some transition. So I would think that access to funding to help in that transitions will be important as well.
Looking at ethical and environmentally responsible production, this is on the rise, but this also raises the cost of production. So where does this leave conscious consumerism?
Today, more ethical and more environmental productions, it also translates to higher costs. So it could be tempting to look at as a liability. But more importantly, it needs to be seen as an opportunity cost. How much business you may miss if you are not sustainable. And today, consumerism, which is the act of influencing the industry by spending its dollar, it's really gaining momentum, especially among the populations of young populations. And this is a global trend. I want to share more of my views, right? When we talk about sustainable food, for me, it's important that it should not be a niche premium market, like only some wealthy small number of consumers can afford it. Otherwise, it's like you praise yourself that you save a tree, but you have a forest burning behind it, right? So for me, the sustainability need to have a critical mass. It need to apply to the mass productions. This is where we really have the impact. So sustainability, it is a volume game, and this is really where we see the most of impact actually. And we talk about the conscious consumerism, but also believe that sustainability is also not only consumer driven. I think there's some top-down measure where it can be done, especially from government in terms of regulations. Our mandate, because of what we're doing in the food space, has much larger consequences and impact. So we need to do more than just being a consumers, given what we're doing in the food space, right? So for instance, what we're doing in the finance world is we are promoting green financing tools to incentivize clients to have greener performance, and we measure that, for instance.
You're right, JY. Good for the planet is fast becoming a mantra, and critical mass will certainly bring down prices. As we've seen, many years ago, organic became a trend, and now organic foods and products are much better priced than it was maybe 10 years ago. You also mentioned regenerative agriculture. Can you explain what this is and how it benefits both the producer and consumer?
When I was preparing this interview, I know we're going to talk about this topic, and I started searching about it, and I was really scared not knowing enough about this subject. And after hours digging into that, I realized that I still don't know enough about it. So as a disclaimer, I just want to say that I'm not an expert. I apologize if I'm making it wrong. But for me, regenerative agriculture is still an evolving movement. So some of my statements I'm saying today may be different tomorrow. But the approach and the concept, I think, remain the same. It's centered on the conservations and rehabilitations of farming resource, especially focusing on the soil quality and biodiversity. And by doing that, you fight against the climate change in the same time. So I heard of interesting way to look at it. And one interesting way to look at the concept is probably to look at soil as your own body and ask yourself some of these questions. What your body telling you regarding the health that you're having? It's feeding me with only one single crop, like you only crop one species, or you only grow one species in that land. Is it good for me in the long run? Or how can we let the body, meaning the soil, regenerate itself rather than overusing supplements or overworking on it? So what it means for farmers and what it means for the consumers, I think this is where we have essential questions. On the farmer side, the key question is how it can be profitable, or at least how it can be profitable in a short run. Maybe not immediately, but at least in a defined timeline. For consumers, I think it's about differentiations. It could be taste or it can be label, but how it can be different from the offer today. I think at the end of the day, regenerative agricultures, I don't think it needs to be dogmatic. It's a bit like in France, where I see a movement, what we call in France, the French word is agriculture raisonnée. I think it should translate by raison agricultures. So in a very simple translation, it's about being pragmatic, applying some of this science-based knowledge in a practical way, and continue to evolve with the knowledge and technology that you have on the space.
As it sounds, JY, regenerative agriculture seems to resonate also with sustainability Am I correct?
Yeah, definitely. I think it goes together, right? The question is a bit when I mentioned about the critical mass and how it can be a business model which is viable for both the producers and the farmers. Producers and also the consumers, of course.
JY, thank you so much for your insights and lending perspective to the many new terms and thoughts we discovered in your article on the 4 key dimensions in agri-food post-COVID-19. It's been such a pleasure talking to you, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Connie. It was a real pleasure.
Disruptions start to challenge the status quo of agri-food, as many breakthroughs and synergies in Foodtech and Agtech have not hatched out yet. Meanwhile, sustainable development is empowered by the collective consciousness, which drive the sense of purpose toward a positive impact. Thank you for joining us. We hope you found this second segment useful. You can download it on www.asian-agribiz.com.